All right, I've got 4:30, so we will go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this first session. My name is Autumn Perry, and I'm the College Access and Success Program Director for both the Higher Education Policy Commission and the Community and Technical College System. As a point of housekeeping before we get started, please feel free to enter any questions that you may have for our presenter in the session chat located over to the right-hand side of your screen. When we reach the end of the session, I will field those questions to the presenter for you. And now I have the pleasure of introducing this first session entitled Elevate and Amplify, the Importance of Promoting Student Voices. Our presenter for this session is Ms. Anna Williams. Anna is a 2021 graduate of Marshall University, where she earned Bachelor of Arts degrees in both English and Public Communications. During her senior year at Marshall, she served as student body president and chaired the statewide Advisory Council of Students. Anna is currently employed by the U.S. Department of Education and is headed to law school at WVU this fall. Anna.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. It's so nice to have you, even if we're virtual. Thank you for attending my presentation. Like Autumn said, today we're going to talk about promoting student voice on campus and in the college application process. And so I'll just go ahead and tap and get started. So yeah, a little bit about myself. Like Autumn said, I graduated from Marshall University with my degree in English and Public Communication. In about 3 weeks, which is kind of scary, I'll be attending the West Virginia University College of Law. I'm currently employed by the Office of Grants and Acquisition at the United States Department of Education, and I am formerly the Advisory Council of Students Chair, meaning that I represented all college students in West Virginia on many different policy discussions and government discussions, as well as just bringing our needs forward to the AGPC. So my goals in this presentation today are to outline what student needs are in 2021, as well as consider techniques for engaging college students to promote their overall wellness, and finally, looking at how we can identify spaces for student voices in our communities. So in our first section, I want to start by outlining student needs in 2021. As you can imagine, they might look a little different with all that has gone on in our world in the last year and a half. But by highlighting these needs and the associated facts, we understanding of where students might feel most called to action in our respective communities. And so first, I have a question for you all, and you can just pop them in the chat. What do you think is a major student need in 2021? Let's see if I can get back to the chat. Yes, okay. So yeah, if you can think of anything that you feel is pertinent to students in 2021, like I said, just pop them in the chat. Flexibility or balance, that's absolutely a great one with all that is going on. Mental health resources, it's a really good one. Reliable technology. Yeah, these are all great, and they certainly pertain to what we're going to talk about. Student needs in adulthood who they can rely on, absolutely. So these all fit into what I like to assess or categorize student needs under 4 sort of large umbrellas in 2021. And so these 4 major needs are access, affordability, inclusivity, and mental health, as it was noted. And so by examining these categories, we can really get a better understanding of what's going on and how we might be able to help. And like I said, these are just broad umbrellas. There's a lot of little things that fit underneath them, and we're going to get into that by just examining each of these 4 larger points. So we're going to start with access, and I define that as the ability to have reliable, consistent, easy pathways to meet sort of the basic needs and the material needs of education. And so understanding access issues is important because we can then build spaces that contribute to stability and thus educational success. So some access issues, which I saw in the chat, technology, food, housing, health services, transportation, etc. All of these pertain to access, and having access to them can positively contribute to educational success, particularly in the stressful environment of college. As you can see on your screen, there are some significant disparities that college students face. 15 to 20% of them reporting limited to no access to reliable technology. This was certainly something we encountered in West Virginia in the last year, and it's something we'll keep working on. Another sort of stark statistic is that 40% of college students experience some sort of food insecurity. In West Virginia, it can actually tend to be a little higher than that. For example, at Marshall University, when we surveyed our students, I think it was 42% of them were experiencing food insecurity. So it's certainly something that is not unknown to many of our students. And then some sort of housing insecurity is also pertinent among students. 47% of college students in 2020 reported that they had some sort of housing insecurity. When we say insecurity, what we mean is that there is some instability in their ability to meet their basic or material needs. So with technology, it could be that they're sharing a device or perhaps their device is older and doesn't support the necessary systems. With food insecurity or housing, it just means they don't have reliable access. So a lot of our students are showing up to class hungry, or having slept in their car. I've heard many tales, and I'm sure you all have as well. So then my next umbrella is affordability in higher education, and this includes both the sticker price and beyond. I say that because a lot of our students, particularly those in first-generation families, do not incorporate the fees and the setup and the moving into their budgets, and that can put a humongous burden on many of their families. I feel like if you've lived and breathed in the last decade, you know that college costs have increased pretty dramatically, 25% over just the last 10 years. As a result, many students and their families, like I said, are having to really think about whether college is what it once was valued. And, you know, I find that higher education is very valuable, but I completely understand with cost barriers why some families, especially those who have never sort of charted into this water, would be a little bit worried about that. Many families are having to take out loans or make significant financial and lifestyle changes. As a result of these fees, these unexpected costs, the lack of transparency in some of our budgets, personal hardships, particularly in the last year, you know, at least on the campus I was on and what I heard on the Council of Students, a lot of people had experienced job loss or changes in routines that affected their ability to continue their education, as well as cost is just not as flexible as it once was to work around. You know, I don't know many 18-year-olds that could work enough to cover their tuition in 2021, but, you know, they certainly come to school ambitious. And, you know, I've had many, I was an RA for freshmen, and I've had many try to work and still contribute to their family finances as well as their own. And it can be a lot for a college student, particularly in a stressful first year environment, and it can negatively impact their pathway to education. The next point I want to talk about is inclusivity. I find that this is a major need among students, especially in 2021. Inclusivity can broadly be defined as the desire to establish some sort of sense of belonging, purpose, or direction among peers. I think we are all familiar with this. You know, everybody likes to feel like they've got somebody. That was brought up in the chat. Inclusivity is really all about making sure that higher education and college is an inviting, multifaceted, and dynamic space that can meet many different individual needs. There's certainly some areas of concern that we can mend. As you see on the screen, a lot of underrepresented groups slowly sort of taper off in participation in the process simply because, you know, they don't have a mentor, they don't have a person really helping them, and also just the unexpectedness of the process. And then also there are some persistent disparities that have sort of infiltrated our system that we can actively work to reverse. Certainly in West Virginia, a lot of our low-income students struggle with the application fees, the testing fees, and $120 for this and that. Well, in some families, that's the grocery bill, and it can be pretty taxing. So a lot of times students just want to know that people hear that and they're empathetic to that, and that campuses are inclusive and they actively work against harmful structures and patterns of negativity. Finally, mental health, I told you it was a good one, is a humongous need among students. In recent years, conversations about mental health have opened up, which has really helped drum up some more resources. However, many of these resources still remain underfunded or unknown among students, and it can be really difficult to get some of them to kind of come to terms with these personal issues, particularly in the first year when they're not really sure, what's going on, and they've got all these massive changes, and so it can be really hard on our students. Now, throw in a global pandemic, and it can really, really be hard on our students. So, here's some numbers from the National Institute of Health. 70% of students reported increased stress and anxiety, 89% difficulty concentrating or engaging with their peers, and 68% fear their educational future. And I think that is a humongous area of concern, particularly moving forward, with just making sure that our students are active in conversations about what higher ed is going to look like and how they participate in that. Personally, and I think a lot of people would agree that other needs, such as the ones we've addressed, addressing those like affordability, access, and inclusivity can certainly contribute positively to mental health. So I don't want to exclude those. But beyond that, there's certainly more long-term needs that our students will soon need to participate in conversations about. So to transition from there, now that we have a little bit of a deeper understanding about what those needs are for our students in 2021, we can sort of transition to examining methods to better understand and engage with students and the responsibility that we have in that. In order to promote their participation and, contribute to some sort of substantive change as we confront these larger issues. So now I have another question for you to put in the chat. It's, what element do you think matters most when working with students? This can be a feeling, this can be something tangible, but I would love to hear what you guys think. I'm gonna float back to the Hopin. Let's see. So when it comes to working with positivity, yes, absolutely. Mental health, absolutely. Connection, yes, absolutely. All of these, I think, something that comes in my relationship, all of these, I think, encompass the element of trust, I think is really important to me, establishing some sort of connection with the students and becoming an entrusted person. So with those in mind, let's float back to my presentation screen. I want to talk about some methods that I feel are great for engaging with students. And the first method I recommend is just the good old-fashioned read the room. So this is, making the intentional effort to observe what space and what time is like for a student. So, as we know, many times we project our own stressors or indicators into our environment. And I find that young people are sort of navigating that, particularly in a space such as higher ed, where they're more in an autonomous being and they're kind of getting to know themselves as well as the world around them. So by observing what's going on, we can really begin to ask ourselves a little more about how we can positively and intentionally contribute to their needs and perhaps some discourse that's going on. I call these the stop signs. I thought it was cute. So, looking at the space, is this space comfortable? Is it inviting? Sometimes spaces can be intimidating for shy folks. Classrooms or large lectures may not be the space where they're going to feel the most comfortable talking about what they need. Whereas, creating those student hangout spaces or, the one room everybody goes to have lunch in, I certainly had those. They can be more comfortable and we can get to know our students a little bit better. Time, just what's been going on lately. The news cycle is, it can reveal a lot about what our students might be feeling. Certainly last year with all of what occurred with George Floyd and the protests, many students were just feeling a little odd in the world, and they were having to reassess some of their friendships or relationships, and certainly considering that is important in the context of building relationships with students. Another aspect is opportunities. So I always ask myself if, the space and the room that I'm in and what I'm hearing, is there a meaningful opportunity to intervene or mention a resource or mention an idea and sort of instill that confidence in the student? And finally, just noticing patterns in the room. So is something positive or negative going on? Are we seeing, the same theme recurring on and on between our students? Is it something that they're stuck on that perhaps, our own experience could suggest an idea? So it's all about just reading the room and making sure our students feel comfortable, and you sort of gotta be the fly on the wall, if you will. The next method is fostering peer relationships. I think the best way to do this, and I feel like I will, die on this hill, is understanding the different leadership styles of our students, even if they don't quite understand their own leadership style. I find that this is really valuable because you can determine how different people go about activating their voice and in certain settings. I know at the beginning of undergrad, I was incredibly shy, and so I was never going to be the leader that kind of stood up and took charge. I was more behind the scenes. But I did have a mentor help me recognize that and develop that into, my professional life today. And so understanding the different leadership styles of our students is incredibly important, and kind of offering just a couple comments here and there to sort of guide them along the way. Also, my next point is a little bit debated, but I think it is encouraging to allow those small groups to form, as long as they're contributing positively to the environment. Because sometimes people work well in groups, or the rapport, the discourse that they engage in can actually promote really great ideas. In the organization I served in at Marshall, student government, a lot of times people would kind of go into their own little groups and they would come back as a larger group, and we would have a bunch of new ideas. And, it ended up being really useful, although the concept is a bit intimidating. On top of all of that, I think fostering peer relationships and allowing those groups to grow and those individuals to grow in their leadership style creates a really great sense of autonomy, which helps students gain that confidence it takes to approach new projects. Had it not been for my mentors in undergrad, sort of kind of letting me figure it out in our own hallway of the campus, I don't think I would have had, the nerve or the confidence to start approaching different offices at my campus and to talk about the issues I had talked about with my peers and have been encouraged by those mentors to kind of act upon. And that kind of brings me to my final point about fostering those relationships is, using our role to become a trusted reference point. Sometimes it can be a bit jarring for students to realize, who would have thought when you're 18 that, everybody else was once 18 too. That was a shock to me, I'll be honest, but, being a trusted reference point and, allowing students to confide in you and, relaying the lessons that perhaps we all learned in undergrad, I found it was incredibly useful, and it helped me, learn that I always had that person to fall back on, like you all mentioned in the chat. Finally, building a sense of community is an incredibly important step and method for getting our students involved in whatever area of concern that they're most passionate about. I find that this is such an intentional and such a wonderful step to take, and it really breaks down into two parts. The first is recognizing both the basic and complex needs for students. So some of the basic ones, perhaps we can put an umbrella over, and then there's some more complex ones where it's individualized, but through those relationships and by, really diving into our students and observing what's going on around them, we can kind of get a better sense of the complex needs. And once we do that, we can build the broader community and campus into daily practices. So, one example I use is at Marshall University. There's so many different ideas floating around in so many different areas of passion. And there was an individual in the student affairs office that recognized that, saw the leadership potential in the students, and developed a board fellows program that allowed the students to serve on boards in the community. And in doing that, they were able to sort of activate their voice and also have a mentor back at home to talk to. And so, building the broader community in and sort of making it standard can alleviate a lot of that weird middle ground and awkward transition into internships or professionalism. It empowers our students, in essence, to sort of take charge and go out and speak their mind in a professional and positive manner. So with that, I now just want to transition into the final section of this presentation, which is making space for student voices. This is all about how we can apply those needs and methods and their desires, how we can apply that into them activating their voices, and how we can support that. We've sort of defined a lot leading up to this point, and now I just want to build on the foundation that we laid. So keeping with my lovely pattern, I want to ask you a question first, which is, where do you think student voice is the most present? We all come from different places, but where do you find that students are most active in, speaking what they need or vocalizing their needs? I'm going to exit back out of this so I can see the chat. So personally, I think among peers, yes. That's what I was going to go with, Autumn. Usually when they're involved with an adult who fosters this, absolutely, and that's why it's so important to kind of use those methods. Peers, most active, yes, absolutely. So, I think it does all come down to their peer relationships, as well as sort of being that, person in the back that's like, hey, what about this? But 4 places that I think they are most present, I'm gonna switch back to this, classrooms. I find we can locate a lot of student voice there. They don't always have to be the loudest in the room or the one responding. A lot of times students can write about what's challenging them, what they're thinking about. And as adults or as the trusted figures in the room, we can sort of gain a better understanding to the more quiet voices as well as the louder voices. I think a lot of student voice can be located in organizations, and they may not necessarily be during the formal organization. Sometimes in those hangout spaces, you can find out a lot about what's going on and what's concerning people and what they want to grow on. Offices across campuses, I find actually have a lot of hidden student voice, those who work there and, manage, whether it's the Women's and Gender Center, Intercultural Affairs, Student Affairs. They kind of have a good lay of the land, and they've kind of run into a lot of students, and they can speak a lot about the different experiences that are going on. And then obviously with my generation, it's media of all forms, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all of it. Students are very vocal on social media. A lot of times their profiles are somewhat of a diary about themselves, where they can, display their creativity, what they care about, what's important to them, and all the rest. So what I want to hit on really with these 4, and like you said, among peers, these are all sounding boards for student voice, but a lot of times the disconnect is the speaker. So how do we get the students to actually vocalize their needs? Now, one would say, I guess you could stand up and yell, certainly, but in our role, it's important to become the speaker for our students around you. And so there's different ways that we can, or different pathways we can take to amplify student voices. and build upon what we learned in this presentation. And so interpersonally, instilling confidence and independence among students, developing that trust, being the mentor, the sounding board, the voice of reason. If we all think back to our educational experiences, I'm sure one person comes to mind where you're like, that was just the best teacher, or that was the best person, and they made me feel so good because, they intentionally had conversations with me and they pointed out, good things that I was doing or ways I could contribute. It never hurts to be that person. I think sometimes it can be intimidating to be that person because we're like, wow, these are such big shoes to fill. But a little goes such a long way in many students' lives. Recently at Marshall, we elected the second set of 2 women to serve as student body president and vice president. And I remember when the vice president came into my office, she was a freshman, I was almost a senior, and she had mentioned how, I really love to get involved in student government, and, I could maybe see myself in my senior year, running for something. And I just talked to her and she explained all the plans she had for the world around her. And I said, well, you can run next year. And I put her on my team and, sort of showed her the ropes a little bit. And sure enough, she's the student body vice president now. And I would have never thought that I could help someone realize that. But like I said, just those little conversations go an incredibly long way. In terms of more tangible aspects, incorporating students into committees, meetings, policy discussions, etc., I think is so important. It seems a little bit obvious, but when we start to break down some of the structures in our state or at our campuses or at our schools, you can kind of start to identify where students are absent, and it's in a lot of those decision-making meetings. It can be incredibly impactful when someone says, I wish I had the student perspective, to just put the student in there. I remember when I served as advisory council student chair, I thought it was, I was terrified. I was going to go to these HEPC meetings and talk in front of everybody, and they wanted to know what I thought. And then I got there and they were like, wow, this was an amazing contribution. And, not only did it grow me personally and make me more confident in my voice, but, I took it back to my peers and we suddenly felt really respected and considered. And it was an amazing relationship to build. So really taking those intentional steps to put the students in the meeting or put the students in the seat, it goes an incredibly long way. The second tangible way is just encouraging and acting upon student ideas in a meaningful way. When I think back to high school, the West Virginia floods had hit, and one of our teachers, knew that we were all really distraught, and she said, well, why don't we plan something, and got our brains together and sort of was the hand among us to help us organize a school supply drive for some of the schools that were affected near us. And so taking those little steps among any student group, if it's a mental health concern and you get everybody talking and they want to do, an event or a drive or, at Marshall, someone did a 5K for the counseling center. It's a small drop in a bucket of a larger issue, but for a student and their development, it goes such a long way for them to have something that they can say, I took my idea and I made a positive impact in my community because somebody helped guide me and somebody, believed in my voice. And finally, and I hit on this a little bit, it's creating intentional avenues for student leadership among the broader campus and community structure. What that means is, approaching different offices, or perhaps you are the office approaching the campus, to really dig deep into those relationships. Students respond so positively to their peer relationships. They tend to respond really positively to those professional relationships. It just kind of takes some time, getting to know who they are, and they do that through this process. So creating those partnerships with organizations, or having those organizations involved on, community organizations involved on the campus, it's incredibly important. At Marshall, we had the Board Fellows program. We also had a class about nonprofit writing, where we got to actively partner with nonprofits in the community to gain grant writing experience and just sort of get to know the different charity work that they do. And so, that all started because the teacher said, well, you know what, I want to give these kids a portfolio. And they're, so many people met, executive directors of different organizations. Some of them earned jobs from it. So it's really, adjusting what the classroom voice looks like, or what the political voice looks like for students. There's so many different ways for them to participate. And so I really encourage you, as that one special person, to think about how you could create just one intentional avenue for students in your community. So with that, I just, want to leave you with a final thought, which is that lifting one another up, I find, is the key to community success. Partnering across experiences, generations, backgrounds, it's imperative to building our communities. So thank you for listening to my presentation. This was like my first big presentation post-graduation, so I will always remember this one. Thank you guys for attending, and if we have extra time, I can answer any questions that might pop up. Let's see. Okay, I'm out of it. I'm sorry, I'm not too tech savvy. Okay, thank you, Carolyn, and thank you everybody who participated in the chat.
Yes, if anybody has any final questions or comments for Anna, please feel free to place those in the chat.
I have to tell you, I had like a little nightmare that nobody would come and I was going to be talking to the recording by myself. So thank you all for coming, and thank you, Autumn, again for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Anna, for being here with us today. Wonderful job as always. And thank you to everybody who joined us for this session. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow for day 2 of the Student Success Summit, which will begin with the 9 a.m. plenary session. And don't forget to share insights from this year's conference on social media using the hashtag StudentSuccessWV. All right, thank you all.